Good evening and thanks for joining us. Their mission was to soar over the country, lifting the collective spirit of the nation during the pandemic. Tonight, Canada's snowbirds are grounded and are mourning one of their own. Operation Inspiration came to a crashing halt on Sunday when one of the jets plummeted to the ground shortly after takeoff from the airport in Kamloops, BC. An investigation is now underway into what went wrong. The crash killed Captain Jenn Casey, a public affairs officer, but the pilot, Captain Richard MacDougall, survived. A number of people were watching the takeoff and taking videos, and those will likely play a role in the investigation. It all happened less than a minute after takeoff from Kamloops Airport, shortly before noon on Sunday. Everything looked routine. The two snowbirds were en route to Kamloops, BC, the Tudor jets flying side by side. On this shot, at about 23 seconds in, you can hear a slight pop in the engine. A split second later, one of the jets peels away and gains altitude.
As he starts to climb, we call that a zoom, and he's trying to convert airspeed into altitude. In aviation, we say that airspeed is life, altitude is life insurance. And so having that extra altitude creates two options. One is sort out the problem while you're further from the ground, and the second is to create more space between the airplane and the ground to eject.
It keeps rising until about 35 seconds when it appears to stall and begins to nosedive. At 39 seconds, you can see what appear to be two ejections, but no visible sign of parachutes. And about 41 seconds after takeoff, the snowbird crashes into a residential neighbourhood. The pilot landed on the roof of a house. Remarkably, no one on the ground was injured. Neighbours rushed to the scene to help. Robin Gill is in Kamloops, BC tonight and has been talking to some of them. Robin.
Dawna, as you mentioned, the plane went down in a residential neighborhood just a few minutes from here, and that is why so many neighbors were able to rush to the scene. Some of them are nurses, some of them are paramedics, and they're among the many people here in Kamloops who have dropped off flags and cards and flowers in a very touching tribute to the snowbirds, because what this community witnessed was very devastating.
Spectators on the ground knew within seconds that something was wrong.
We heard a big bang, saw the two pilots be ejected, and then we basically just ran over.
The plane hit a house and burst into flames. An elderly couple lives in the home. Remarkably, they weren't hurt, but the pilot landed on the roof and suffered serious injuries. Captain Richard MacDougall is one of the coordinators for the Snowbirds team. According to colleagues, the 34-year-old is well trained with an affinity for singing. Witnesses say he was asking about his teammate while dealing with his own pain.
He was on a stretcher. I don't think they wanted him to walk because he was complaining of back injuries, but yeah, he was wiggling his toes and his fingers.
Phillips and her mom, a retired nurse, rushed to the scene to help. That's when they noticed the other member of the Snowbirds in the backyard.
Her injuries were likely that impact. And the ejection seat was beside her. So, and I don't think their parachutes opened at all.
No.
There was nothing anyone could do to save Captain Jennifer Casey. She and MacDougall often flew together. Casey was the public affairs spokesperson for the Snowbirds and recently discussed a crash involving the Snowbirds in Atlanta, Georgia.
Thankfully, everybody was able to walk away from that incident. The pilot, Captain Kevin de Montgrenier, used his skills and training to put the plane in an unpopulated area, and everybody was able to walk away.
The day of the crash that took her life, the Snowbirds faced delays because of weather and, according to one pilot, a technical problem.
All right, so we're on the ground in Kamloops. Unfortunately, because of some electrical malfunctions, a few of us had to come back early.
The Snowbirds jets are now grounded at the airport in Kamloops. The military has its own investigative team looking into the matter.
The precise circumstances leading up to the crash are not known. The crash site has been secured by local law enforcement, and the immediate flight safety response is being coordinated on the ground by the team's flight safety officers as we speak.
The memorial for Captain Casey grows, a community heartbroken for a woman they didn't even know.
Obviously, it's very, very sad that this would have happened in a time when they're trying to inspire and keep the morale up of all Canadians. It's a tough day.
The Prime Minister and his Defence Minister Harjit Sajjan have expressed their condolences, and they, like the rest of Canada, are hoping to get answers from the military investigation that has been launched. A key witness, though, will be Captain MacDougall, who did survive this crash, but he's still in hospital with very serious injuries, Dawna.
Right, Robin Gill in Kamloops, BC, thanks. Well, the fact the pilot survived gives investigators a big advantage. He will hopefully be able to give them a first-hand account of every second of that takeoff and crash. Our Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stephenson has been talking to people about the investigation. Mercedes, who will lead it?
Well, Dawna, this will be led by the Directorate of Flight Safety, which is part of the Air Force, and they will do this using Air Force experts as well as experts, if necessary, from Transport Canada to get involved in civil aviation. They conduct the investigation whenever there is a military crash. It's not the Transportation Safety Board or the civilian authorities, but it's essentially the same way of going about it. So they are going to be gathering evidence on the ground. They're going to be interviewing those who witnessed the crash, especially the pilot, hoping that he might be able to tell them what happened, or at least the sequence of events that could give them some hints. And of course, they'll also be looking at that video that the rest of us have been, trying to determine why he suddenly loses power. And that's where you see him do that zoom maneuver, and where we just heard in the press conference from Lieutenant Colonel French that he ran out of options and made the command decision that they had to eject out of the aircraft. We should have an initial sense of what they think happened within 30 days, Lieutenant Colonel French said, but it could take up to a year for the investigation to be completed.
Mercedes, ejection is what these pilots train for. It is a split-second decision, and it's what saved the pilot's life in this case. We know it's happened before in these Tudor jets. How much of a factor might the ejection seats be in the investigation?
Well, it will certainly be a factor. And we learned a little bit in this press conference when Lieutenant Colonel French revealed that both people had successfully ejected out of the plane, because that wasn't clear from watching it. Looked like there could be two ejections, but we weren't completely sure. The question will be, did the seats function as they were intended to? These are older seats, so in newer aircraft, you can eject much lower to the ground, pilots tell me, and it's much more survivable. These are older aircraft. They're not designed to save your life at a low altitude. And they will be looking at whether that seat separated properly and whether or not that was any kind of a factor in Captain Casey's death. It has been a factor in past deaths of Snowbird pilots that there have been malfunctions with the ejection seats. Dawna?
Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa, thank you.